Welcome to the Beltway Broadcast, the premier podcast for the workplace learning and talent development professionals of the Association for Talent Development's Metro DC chapter. We've got some great resources in store for you today.
Hello, fellow ATDers. I'm Stephanie Hubka, and I am the managing partner of Protos Learning, as well as a chapter past president and a member of the pod squad here at the Metro DC chapter of ATD.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Eanes, owner of Eanes Training, as well as also a chapter past president and a member of the pod squad here at Metro DC.
That's right. And we also have our producer, Halyna Hodges. And for this episode, we are very excited to be welcoming Jeff Gothelf to our show. So thank you so much for joining us, Jeff.
It's my pleasure, Steph and Chris. Nice to be here.
We are really excited to learn from you today. I know this is one of those topics that I feel like I know a lot less about than I probably should.
Good.
We're going to be talking about lean UX. But before we get into our conversation today, we would love it if you would tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, absolutely. So my background is in digital design. So I started my career doing interface design for actually at America Online. If you recall, back in the day, you probably received CDs from us in the late 90s.
Still might
and
have
2000s.
a few.
Yeah. Sorry. I was partially responsible for that. And over the years, I worked my way up in design and then into product management, digital product management. So building all kinds of different products as the web got more and more interactive, and eventually became an entrepreneur, started a consulting company. And when we sold that consulting company, I went out on my own. And in between, kind of in the process there, along with my teams and colleagues, and ultimately my longtime co-author and business partner, Josh Seiden, we solved some problems for digital design teams, digital product design teams that essentially existed at every single team, and no one had a great answer for. And what came out of that was initially a bunch of content, and then eventually a book, the first book, which was Lean UX. And the book really changed what I did for a living. It really drove me towards training and speaking and coaching and really building this business around these concepts and then scaling it from there. And since then, we're Josh and I writing our third book together. It's my fifth. And so kind of just building this conversation that we'll talk about in detail here in just a minute. And so today I work as a trainer, like most of you, and a speaker, which I really love doing, and a coach, which is okay.
I think that's fantastic. I was excited to have you here to talk about Lean UX. I am more excited now to get into that with you. And I think for a lot of us, Lean UX is probably a term that we've heard, maybe even could piece together a definition if we really needed to. But I think that's probably as good a place to start as any. Tell us, what is Lean UX?
Sure. So the problem that exists to this day, sadly, because I was hoping to solve it, but good for me because it keeps me busy, to this day is there's a challenge in digital product development. So when I say digital product development, I'm talking about apps, services, websites, pretty much anything you access with a screen. The challenge with that is that the modern nature of technology is continuous. When I work, I'll give you a perfect example. When I worked at America Online, everything was static because we had to print CDs. Right. You remember you go to the store and you buy a box of software, right? And we would print 15 million CDs and put them in the mail and ship them to you, right? Which made sense in 1999 and in 2000. Today, if I told you that you had to go out and buy a box of Netflix, right?
No.
Exactly.
No,
that's the reaction. It's so ridiculous, right? Because that's the modern nature of software, right? We don't have to go buy software. It just shows up on our browsers, on our phones, and it updates and hopefully improves on a continuous basis. There's no end to this, right? Again, like whereas at AOL, we had to stop working on stuff because we had to go print 15 million CDs. Today, the folks at Facebook aren't coming into work and saying, well, I think we're done. That's it. Right. Like, there's no more Facebooking to do or whatever. Right. Like it's never going to happen because it's just not the way we think about technology today. So the problem that causes, so it presents a tremendous opportunity and an interesting problem. The tremendous opportunity is that because we can continuously deliver stuff into the hands of our users and customers and so forth, we can very quickly learn whether or not we delivered something valuable to them. Are they using it? Are they using it more than once? Are they paying for it? Do they tell their friends? So that's the opportunity. The problem that's created is it's created software development organizations that are incentivized to produce more stuff faster. So whereas at AOL, it took us 6 months or 9 months to get software out the door, today, a company like Amazon gets literally, this is not an exaggeration, it's an actual fact, they get software out the door once every second, right? 60 times a minute.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous, right? And so what's interesting, the problem that this has caused is it's created this world where teams are incentivized to produce features, just to make stuff. And they're not incentivized to figure out if the stuff that they made is valuable, right? The measure of success is, did you make it, rather than did anyone use it? And what's interesting is, because this stuff lives forever, anything that you make technology-wise, you have to live with forever. You have to maintain it until you decide to kind of excise it from the system. So finally getting around to the problem. The problem is, when teams are incentivized to deliver stuff, they forget about the users and they forget about the customers, because the incentive isn't, did the user like it? The incentive is, did I build it? And does it work as designed? And so the challenge that we were facing was how to sort of reintegrate design and a focus on the customer into modern digital product development. And Lean UX was a solution to that. Almost every single product development team, digital product development team, faces this issue. And Lean UX was a solution to that when there wasn't a solution to that. And so I'll give you a quick definition, and then I'll stop and see what questions that generate. There was a lot of stuff, right? So
it's great.
So Lean UX is a collaborative, cross-functional process. So we're going to involve designers and software developers and product managers and content creators and marketers in an effort to understand the problem that we're solving with our work for the customer, to understand who the customer is, to define success as measurable changes in the behaviors of those target audience, and then finally, to choose features that actually meet all three of those needs. They solve the problem, they fit the customer, and they help them do the thing that they're trying to do better. That's what Lean UX enables in a very short definition.
Oh, I love it. Well, I especially love the cross-functional part, because oftentimes they're working in silos, right? And then keeping in mind the customer experience. So I know, of course, we want folks to get the book, or I should say books and things, but could you maybe give us an overview of what this process looks like?
Absolutely. So, and it's funny because Lean UX is now in its third edition, which is a real privilege, honestly. It was published initially 10 years ago, and then every 5 years so far, the publisher has come back and said, would you like to update it? Would you like to update it? So it's in its third edition. And in the third edition, we completely rewrote it to match a canvas that we created to teach Lean UX. So I've been training folks in Lean UX for 15 years almost at this point, which is a long time. And as you know, like the more you teach something, the more the class evolves. You figure out a better way to say it, a better example, a better sequence to it. And over the years, a sequence solidified, and we modeled the third edition on this process, and we put the process in a canvas. I don't know if everybody knows what a canvas is, but it's a single sheet facilitation tool with numbered steps.
Yep.
Nice.
Right?
Great.
And so we have a Lean UX canvas, which you can find on my website. Just Google it. And it's got 8 steps. And so the process goes like this. Step 1, what's the problem that we're solving? Okay, so what is the thing that we're not just building stuff for the sake of building it. We're building it to solve a business problem or a customer problem. What's the problem? Step 2, how do we define success in terms of user behavior? In other words, what will people be doing differently if we solve the problem. Step 2. Okay. Step 3, define the customer. So we do a proto-persona exercise where you simply, we make our best guess based on what we know today about who the customer is or customers are. Step 4, what benefits, what motivations, what goals do the customers have in trying to solve this problem? So it's not just, I'm trying to, apply for a mortgage. I'm trying to buy my dream home, right? Like what's the kind of the emotional motivation? We declare a series of solutions that we think might fit all of those assumptions. Step 6 is we form those assumptions into hypothesis statements that combine all those pieces into hypotheses that solve the problem. In step 7, we identify the hypothesis we want to test first, and we identify the riskiest thing about that hypothesis. And then step 8, we design and run an experiment to test that riskiest thing. And then essentially the loop doesn't go all the way back to step 1. The loop kind of goes back one step to step 7 and step 8 for a while, which is what's the next most important thing we need to learn and what's the least amount of work we need to do to learn it. And that's kind of the loop until you exhaust that hypothesis, and then you move on to the next hypothesis. And the idea here is that the canvas or this process, it's an assumptions declaration exercise. So every exercise, you declare a different set of assumptions, and then we meld them together into these testable hypotheses. So a bit of scientific method in there. But that's very, very high level, very quickly, what the Lean UX process looks like.
I really like that. And I like the fact that it's laid out so clearly, but it also sounds like quite a bit of it could be iterative if necessary.
100%.
You learn something, you can apply it, or you can update it or whatever you need to do.
Well, that's just it, right? So we've made a bunch of assumptions, right?
Yeah.
Assumptions is a fancy word for guess because no one likes to admit that they're guessing. Right? Right. No,
you were right.
No one be like, oh, I'm guessing it worked. No, I made an assumption, right? But once you start to test the hypotheses, the feedback that you get inevitably, even if you're not trying, it's going to break some of your earlier assumptions. And so we go back and we refine and we iterate and we refine and we iterate until we figure out, right, what's the best combination of code, copy, design, value proposition, business model, pricing model, whatever it is that solves the problem. That's the goal here. Because again, remember, our goal is not to just make something, right? Make the right thing, and we want to build it in the right way. And there's literally infinite combinations to do that. And so which one is the best, right? In some organizations, the person who gets paid the most, that their idea is the best, or the person who shouts the loudest, it's their idea is the best. But what we're trying to do here is to collect evidence from the market, from real users, and make evidence-based decisions about whether we continue with this hypothesis, whether we pivot to an offshoot of that hypothesis, or we kill it. And I'll say one more thing, and then I know I've been talking a lot, but the basis for this, the foundation for this, is digital products and services. Mm-hmm. But I've done this long enough now over the years that I've applied this in almost every industry, and the ideas, generally speaking, work in almost every industry where there's an opportunity for a round 2. So like if you're landing a person on the moon, you can't iterate on that if they don't get there, but
right.
But alternatively, as long as there's opportunities for iteration, this process works.
I love it. Well, and so you develop courses, right? You've developed, I'm sure, digital courses, I think, as well, right?
Video-based learning, live training, live online training, you name it. Yeah.
So could you give us maybe a high-level example of how you've taken that process?
Oh, yeah.
I used to be terrible at it.
We all start somewhere.
Yeah, no, it's interesting too. Like, so I remember my first time. So Lean UX, the book, comes out, and I've been talking about these ideas for about a year or two at that point. And there was a person in the user experience design world named Jared Spool, who's very famous. He's like the godfather of the space, and he's been around a while. And he was running a series of successful conferences, and all I wanted was to be recognized by Jared Spool and asked to speak at his event. And I got the nod. You know, he was like, "You're in the game." I was like, "Thanks, coach." And then he was like, "I want you to teach a workshop, a full day, 8-hour workshop." I was terrified. Yeah. I looked at him. I said, "Look, I don't know how to do this. I really don't. Like, I've never more than like a 90-minute speech with Q&A on this stuff. Probably the most I've done." He said, "No problem. I'll help you." And I'll never not be grateful to him for him showing me how to break it down. So literally 8-hour class, take out lunch and coffee breaks. You're down to 6 hours already. 25% on your way. You've done nothing. Right. Right?
I love that.
Right? 6 hours, right? Divide that by 4 90-minute sessions. Okay. Wow. Okay. I can program a 90-minute session, right? Right. All of a sudden, right? Okay. How do you tell the story? He's like, "Okay, how do you tell the story? What's step 1? Like, I just told you the story, right? How do you tell the story? Okay. What would you want them to do? Let's build and literally broke it down to these 90-minute modules. And that's how the whole thing began. It began from that one full day, 8-hour class. I'd already been giving talks, so standing in front of an audience wasn't that hard for me. But I'd never asked an audience to do anything. I remember, why would they do what I asked them to do? You know, like I'm like, now go and brainstorm X or whatever, and it's like, why would they do that? And they did,
right?
You know, and I was like, oh my God, what else could I tell them to do? You know, I never tried that. No, but seriously, but that's how it began. And what's interesting is that over the years, the format of that has kind of scaled up and scaled down depending on the need. And then the pandemic, you know, and I was traveling everywhere to deliver this stuff, whether it was, you know, 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 5 day versions of this material. And then the pandemic came and everything switched to online. And that was really interesting because you lost that dynamic feel for the room. You can't make eye contact online, right? Like you have no idea if I'm making eye contact with you or not. I have no idea either, right? And so you don't know who's paying attention, what they're looking at, and that was really weird for a while. And we initially the attempt was to recreate the whole 8-hour, or we had a 2-day class at that point that was really sharp in the real world. To try to recreate that online, it was like 3 or 4 hours on Zoom, and it was terrible. It was, people don't want to. I think there are those who would argue with me, but I don't think somebody wants to sit on Zoom for 4 hours for 3 or 4 consecutive days and listen to me drone on. And so,
or anybody, no matter how interesting they are.
And so we've refined this. So where we've landed now is we do inverted classroom. I forgot the name of what it's called. Blended learning, right?
Or flipped.
So flipped, yes, exactly. So we offload all the videos. I'm sorry, all the lectures to video. Right. Yep. So watch them at your own time, whenever you want, just watch them ahead of class. And then we get to class and we do discussions, exercises, sharing back, etc. And we've learned over the years now, it's been 4 years, actually almost today, right? Since we locked down. Yeah. 4 years, how to drive energy and enthusiasm in the courses. And I think the secret sauce for us is just levity and humor, and recognizing that like it's a tough situation for a lot of folks still, like to sit like this, and it seems to work well for us.
It's fun to listen to you talk about that, because I think there are a lot of us out there who have had a very similar experience. And hearing how, you know, some of what you've learned and what you know to be true about Lean UX can go into the work that so many of us are doing, whether we are instructional designers, whether we're facilitators. You know, frankly, those of us who are in, you know, one end or the other, needs assessments and evaluations, the idea of, for example, putting together, I think you called them proto-personas, bringing those into the picture, getting the data that you need, all of that really goes to serve some real change, I think, at the organizational level. And in fact, I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about what you've seen or experienced when an organization or a team brings Lean UX in. What have you seen, or what might you expect to see at the organizational level?
It's fascinating because there's a mix of reactions. On the positive side, there is excitement at finally being able to validate some of our thinking in advance of actually producing anything heavy, right? Anything expensive at that point,
right?
Or learning something fascinating, like, oh my God, I assumed that people would behave this way, and they do the exact opposite. Yep. Or even at the extreme end of things, which is learning that you don't have to work on this thing, or that you shouldn't. Let's put it that way. Is that you shouldn't work on these things, and that level of excitement of customer contact, learning, and iteration. It's addictive to the teams that do the work, and that's on the positive side. On the sort of the negative side of the organizational transformation that happens is Lean UX challenges the hierarchy with evidence, right? So it's not like, well, I make more money than you, so I'm telling you to make the button red, and you're like, oh, I like blue, and I'll make it red. It's not like that. It's like, hey, we put it out there, and people couldn't see the red button on the red background, boss. Right. So we're going to change the color, right, to white. We've got the evidence, and there is a real threat to the leadership when they see this in action, because a lot of folks in leadership positions, and I think it's starting to shift, but not terribly fast. A lot of folks in leadership positions believe that it is their job to tell people exactly what to do. Not just like strategic direction or what is the goal that I'd like you to achieve, which is their job, but very, very tactically build it this way, write these words, ask them to do X, that type of thing. And when you come back to those folks with evidence that contradicts their strongly held opinion, it's scary to them, right? And there's some executives who handle that really well, right? With a dose of humility, and they'll say, you know what, I was wrong. Let's change direction. Sure. Massively empowering for the whole organization. And there are those who say, nope, I know what's best. I've been here 20 years. Just do what I say, and let's go that way. Yep. And that's super demoralizing for the teams. And I've seen both happen in kind of everything in between. But evidence is tough because it holds up a mirror to your assumptions, and it's, you're going to be wrong, right? That's it, to some extent. Everyone is going to be wrong, and those of us who can admit it can learn from it and move forward. That's the challenge. So that's why it's still an uphill battle with a lot of stuff 15 years later.
Yeah. Wow. Now, I know people are going to want to know more. So before we get to those rapid fire questions, can you share a little bit about how people can access the books, especially actually your most recent one that you've published? Because that one looks pretty cool too. So can you share a little bit about that?
So, look, easy to find, jeffgothelf.com. That's really simple. Connect on LinkedIn. I'd love to have you as a connection there as well. All the books are listed on jeffgothelf.com or on Amazon. I've got an author page. If you search Lean UX or my name, you'll find it there. Forever Employable is the last book that I published, which was a semi-autobiographical journey about how I built my business, because I was getting a lot of questions about it. And I really enjoyed writing that. That was like the most personal of these books. It was like, what am I going to do if I can't feed my kids? And how do I make sure that never happens? And my older kid has a job now, so she's feeding herself. I still got one I'm feeding, so which is good. But seriously, it's good. So honestly, jeffgothelf.com and everything you need there. Plus, we've got a forthcoming book on objectives and key results called "Who Does What by How Much," and that's on there as well. And so that I highly recommend you check that out as well.
That's great.
Nice. We'll make sure that gets into the episode description.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
Okay, Jeff, at the end of every episode, we like to ask 3 rapid fire questions. They don't take more than about 60 seconds to respond to. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Awesome. Okay, they're so easy.
Okay.
Okay. Obviously, everyone needs to read your books. But what is one book that everyone must read and why?
I really like The Art of Action by Stephen Bungay. The Art of Action is about 19th century Prussian military tactics, which, let's get into that. But the reality is that it's a book about setting like leadership and setting goals for your teams and then letting them figure out how to achieve those goals because they're the ones who are closest to the action. And that's the philosophy that we try to teach in everything that we do.
Yeah. Nice.
That's great.
Okay. What is one tool you can't live without?
I'm a big fan of Trello. Trello is a Kanban style board. Atlassian bought it a few years ago. I manage my business, my personal life, sales funnel, you name it. It's all on Trello boards. I really like the simplicity of it, the discipline of it, and the visual nature of it.
Me too. Big fan.
Okay, final question. What is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
The best, I have two. They're so good. Can I give you two?
You can share.
We'll take them both.
So
take them both.
related to the conversation that we've had so far, my favorite piece of advice I got from Janice Frazier, and the advice is strong opinions, loosely held. So this idea that we're all going to base our strong opinions on our experience and our expertise. That's great. That's what we should do. But in the face of evidence, we're willing to change course, right? So that's to me is again how I like to live my life. And the other one I really love, and so I had a client once a few years ago, and at the end of the engagement, she said to me, she was amazing. She was the chief product officer at this online travel site, and she said to me, she goes, "Can I give you some feedback about what it was like to work with you?" And I said, "I would love that. No one ever does that." And so she said, yeah, and she gave me a bunch of feedback and I took a bunch of notes. And there was one thing that stuck with me over the years. They've all stuck with me, but there was one significant one. And she said, outsource the work that you hate. It shows. Like she knew exactly what I enjoyed doing and what I hated doing. And she called it out to me. She was like, you like presenting, you like teaching, you like being here. You light up when you talk about the content. You hate doing sales. I was like, yeah, nailed it. Oh. Right. And so I've got a salesperson now, which is great.
I think that's great advice for home and work.
It is.
100%. So I really love that. And it's stuck with me over the years.
Yeah. I think that's going to stick with me too. That is really good advice. Two pieces of great advice, and not to mention incredible insights today across the board as far as lean UX is concerned. Jeff, I think we probably could have doubled the length of this episode and kept going. I know we have learned so much from you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. This was really fun.
And of course, many thanks to all of you in our community for listening and for watching us. And before you go, we have a message from our producer, Halyna Hodges.
Are you a member of the Metro DC chapter of ATD? We have resources just for you. Go to dcatd.org and select the members-only section of resources to access our digital library, member directory, and chapter documents.
Would you like to be even more involved in our wonderful community? Go to dcatd.org and click on Volunteer to get started.